and you're listening to You Can Fix That in Post with Elise, Simon, and Dave. And today's topic is one location films or bottle episodes for TV. This is Elise's week for the topic, so you can blame her.
Yeah, hopefully that's not a fizzer for the first one.
Not a fizzer. Okay. So when I think of one location films, the classic idea is Saw. Because it was, we've got no money, how do we get these two guys in a bathroom, and how can we make that interesting and last for a feature-length time?
Yeah. It's, it really changed the game for low-budget horror films. It sort of heralded in a whole new era of the new slasher film, which is torture porn, basically, yeah.
Yeah. There are other examples. I mean, it's a classic kind of setup for most horror because horror doesn't traditionally have a budget. So how do you save on money? You put it in the one location. It saves time on setups. It lets you shoot chronologically and in continuity. And likewise, if you only have a certain amount of days, it makes sense that if you've got a big name star, you're not transporting them from location to location to location, wasting time. You've got them there.
Yeah. Hitchcock sort of cornered the market on it in the 50s with Dial M for Murder, Rear Window, Rope.
And in a lot of ways, beyond the horror, you're looking at things that might have been traditionally for the stage, where they wouldn't have been changing a lot of sets. It would be one static set. So if you look at things like Glengarry Glen Ross, if you look at things like Rope,
12 Angry Men.
12 Angry Men, even Sleuth, which was originally done in the 60s with Laurence Olivier and Michael Caine, and then remade not too long ago with Jude Law and Michael Caine. So I think these one-location films and TV shows force the creators to be creative, because if you're not going to be visually that interesting, you have to make the story something that will retain the viewer's interest.
Yeah, you're really leaning on your writer or writers to make your dialogue as interesting. Give you a lot of character work. And make your dialogue worth people's time.
That and the initial premise as well. Like, if you put these people in a circumstance where they have to survive, it's like, what is the initial set of circumstances that forces them into that area? So traditionally, when you look at things like horror, there's Frozen. Not Disney's Frozen. Don't make that mistake. Which is basically people stuck on a ski lift and how do they survive when it's freezing cold and there are wolves below them. Things like Reef, where it's like, we're following these people from A to B and they're in the ocean. Or if you look at sci-fi, Canada, Cube, whereby you've got these people stuck in this trap. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason for that film was, how do you make cheap sets and how do you get 8 people in a room and it'll just be dialogue driven?
Even The Thing or Alien, at a stretch, could be considered a single location film.
Yeah, I could understand that with Alien. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, if Alien was, like, it's set in the one spaceship, except for obviously when they go down to the planet where they get the initial egg and, John Hurt and Facehugger and all that stuff. But it is basically one environment. How do we survive? And
how quickly are people going to turn on each other?
Yeah, exactly.
It seems to be the overarching theme of a lot of these horror films.
And specifically with Thing, you've got that paranoia of it could be anyone who is the Thing, and test to decide how we decide who's human and who's not. In Cube, there's very much everyone's trying to survive, and also there is another sci-fi one called Life Pod, whereby everyone's trying to survive in like a life pod in space, and there's food and water enough for a certain amount of people, and characters are going to die, but it's all one location. Another one is M. Night Shyamalan's Devil, where the entire film is in an elevator. Now, when we say the entire film, there are cutaways to detectives watching the elevator, but there are very few films whereby you're only going to have one location.
Yeah.
We're talking about films where it might be 50 or more % is in that one location, because most films are going to be like, you're in 1% at this location and 1% at this location. So when you got a film whereby the vast majority is 2 people in a bathroom, 8 people in a life pod, 8 people in an elevator, that is one location, in my opinion.
Yeah. Which, there's an episode of Doctor Who, the sort of the newer iteration of Doctor Who, where the Doctor is on a tour bus, basically. A space tour bus. It's from season 4, episode 10. And, of course, the bus breaks down. They're in a hostile environment, and then something's trying to break in. It's not anything new. It's something that's been done and done and done. But as long as you can keep it fresh and give you characters that you're rooting for, that's all you need. It's all about the characters.
And when you look at TV, the most obvious episode of a bottle episode is Community, where Abed basically tells you, oh, we're doing a bottle episode. And basically the premise is that they're all accusing each other of stealing, I think it's Annie's pen, and they're stuck in that one location, and it's how do you make it interesting, funny, and unique and new when you're saying you're just stuck in this room and
you're all just turning on each other.
Yeah, basically.
All right, so we're going to have a little chat about Saw. It really was a new genre all on its own. It came out in 2004 and it was a smash. It was massive. Did you see it at the cinema?
No. I think I got introduced to it on DVD in the UK, whereby it was just amongst all these films that I was exposed to. I think one of them at the time was Hellraiser as well, and I knew nothing about it. It wasn't until after I'd seen it and it spawned so many sequels and all that stuff that I got into it, that I realized, oh, it's from some Melbourne guys, and, they're Australian, and I live in Australia. Isn't that novel?
Yeah, it got a lot of press here because they were basically just 2 film school grads that somehow got lightning in a bottle and had a script that blew up. Like, it was a short film, I think, to start with, and they shopped it round and was picked up, and they were basically given free rein to do what they wanted to do within a small budget. But
the thing with some of these horror films is that they have this huge profitability in it. The margin is so small to begin with. Like, when you look at things like earlier Blair Witch, where it costs like $300,000 to make and it grosses hundreds of millions of dollars, and then you look at something like Saw, where it was, maybe a couple of million in the first instance, but then grosses tens of millions, like I think over 80 million, if not more.
It's one of the most profitable horror films ever made.
Yeah, from budget to what it brought in. But it also came out during a time where I think people were prepared to invest in horror thinking they would get big returns. Like, when you look at Wolf Creek was made in Australia pretty cheaply, went to the US market, and it grossed tens of millions of dollars again.
Yeah. There was a bit of a gap in the market, really, because the slasher films of the 90s had petered out. Like, your Screams and your I Know What You Did Last Summer had run their course.
Yeah, they'd become more ironic, and people had just gotten used to the formula of that. So instead of being referential films about, I'm aware that if I go to A, someone's going to cut my throat, and let's make a...
If the blonde girl runs up the stairs, she's going to get gutted.
Yeah, and we'll make a little joke about that. People were over that. And then this thing came about where it's just like, hey, even though we're a one-location thing, let's just be fucking brutal. Like, when you look at that film and the traps, it is very gory, it's very horrific. And the natural progression of that was, okay, so if people like gore and like, brutal
Let's
things,
just turn it up to 11.
and do things like Hostel and,
Yeah.
all those other
Human
things.
Centipede.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Let's just really do some crazy shit.
But I have to say, the original Saw was original, is entertaining, and regardless of the amount of sequels that it spawned,
I think we're at 7 now.
yeah, I think we are. I think, so we had 6, and then they had the final chapter, didn't they? And then they've just done Jigsaw, which I think is 8.
Holy moly.
And the thing is, I mean, the character of Jigsaw actually died in like 3.
Third one.
Yeah, and it's just like, I wonder how many times we can do flashbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is the interesting thing about this franchise. It just keeps looping in on itself.
Yeah.
It just like it like episode 5 references episode 3, and then episode 4 takes up where 6 left off, and it just goes in and in around in itself. Which is great for fans, I guess. I mean, it gives them
Lots of
things to
backstory,
look out
yeah.
for, and if they can go back and pick up on clues that were left behind
Yeah.
3 or 4 movies ago, it gives you a bit more than just, oh, how is someone going to get their face drilled off,
I think the major problem was that they created Freddy Krueger and they killed Freddy Krueger off in the 3rd film. And it's like, how do they bring him back? And Tobin Bell was such a great villain. Even though in the 1st film, he literally just gets up off the floor and goes, the key's in that bathtub and, game over. But then when you look at number 2 and number 3, fans love Tobin Bell as Jigsaw.
Yeah.
And they killed him. And it's like, well, how do we bring that guy back that we really like? Oh, we'll just do another flashback
How do you
and
live
another
forever?
flashback. Yeah. And when you look at the recent, iteration, Jigsaw, it's taking place where he's still alive. And you're like,
Yeah, that's what I mean about it looping around on itself.
yeah,
They've created this whole back catalogue that they can just, it's a well that never needs to end because,
they're milking the cash cow.
yeah.
And admittedly, the quality has gone down in terms of story and originality.
Yeah.
But for those people who want to get specific things out of a film, which is, I don't know, to live vicariously or to have some kind of...
To be grossed out, let's be honest.
Yeah, there's a bit of that. And, you can tell things are getting milked when they go 3D. Ooh, let's see the intestines thrown at us.
It's not quite Fast and the Furious level ridiculousness, with title names.
Yeah, I feel like they're not even trying. It's like Fast and Furious, The Fast and the Furious, Too Fast, Too...
Furious.
They're just going to put... The next one's going to be FF. And you're just like, what, you couldn't be bothered putting in the rest of the letters? I don't understand this.
Yeah, no, they've kind of just stuck with, the numerical order and then thrown in a jigsaw at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as a character goes, though, he's quite interesting as a horror antagonist, given that he's not this, like, mechanical monster that no matter how many times you shoot him, he gets back up. He's, from the get-go, he is weak physically.
He's got cancer.
He's dying of cancer, but he's still this kind of object of terror. Like, they've done a lot with a little here.
Yeah, it's... If someone said to me, look at the series Friday the 13th, I'd go, you can pretty much skip 3 till 8. They're all the same.
Yeah.
But when you look at Saw, yes, there's a lot of similarities between stuff, but there is a lot of richness of character, particularly about John Kramer, about his wife and, the miscarriage that happened with her and about his cancer and about how he survived and his background and all that stuff. It's not like we get a huge amount of backstory with Jason Voorhees from episode 3 to episode 8 of Friday the 13th. Likewise with Freddy Krueger.
He's more of a symbol, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. He's just a shape, and, Michael Myers is the shape. So, I think fans like Saw because it's the first time you've got the bad guy with any kind of three-dimensional, character development.
Yeah.
And people who don't watch them...
And plus that creepy little puppet.
Yeah, and the puppet's
People love
awesome.
the puppet.
And people love the traps, and... But yeah.
And he's obviously, as a character, he's supposed to be this kind of mechanical engineering genius.
Well, you'd hope so.
Given that he makes all of this stuff himself, and he's got the whole 3 steps ahead of the cops thing going on as well.
Yeah. The problem, I think, was that when I look at this franchise, they pretty much got a glorified extra in Tobin Bell in the first one. He wakes up, he's got 2 minutes of dialogue.
2 minutes.
And then in number 2, they went, oh, this guy's pretty good. And then they went, this guy's really great. And they'd already killed him off in the 3rd, and they're just like, crap. We have literally killed Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers.
Our franchise before it's...
And they've been struggling in terms of story since then to just find ways to put him in something.
Yeah, how many proteges does he end up having?
Oh, this leads us to Saw the Final Chapter, where it's revealed, and spoiler alert, that Lawrence Gordon, played by Cary Elwes, is still alive. Now, the whole thing was, in the first one, he cuts off his leg, he crawls down an alley, and no one ever knew what happened to him. And the reality was that people were always talking about him and trying to work it out, but that the actor had been jibbed out of his pay from the film. He'd got his initial payment, like Danny Glover and all the others, but when it came to Saw profiting tens of millions of dollars, he never got his,
percentage.
Yeah. So they wanted Dr. Gordon in the others, but it was like, yep, you screwed him over with the first one. The legal battle's still going on. So it's not until number 7 that they actually bring him back. And I was hoping, as a fan of the series, that they were actually going to bring him back for the new one, but they didn't. It was, let's bring back the guy who's been dead for 1,000,000 years.
So just to pivot slightly, it's not just horror that uses the single location idea.
There are, well, I mean, if you think about it, Breakfast Club, you got John Hughes at the height of his powers, thereabouts, and he's got these teen stars, and he's put them in a school in one room, pretty much.
Yeah.
Now, he could have had them in 1,000,000 different locations, making it nice and visually interesting and all that stuff, but that's not what that film's about. It's about the dialogue. It's about the characters.
The character development. And pushing the boundaries of archetypes for characters.
Yeah, giving these stereotypes corners and edges. Like when you look at someone like your Bender, who is just that kind of tough guy, brooding and all that kind of stuff, and then, you've got that scene where he's talking about the scars.
Massive monologue.
Yeah.
Talking about his dad. Yeah.
And the cigarette burn and how his Thanksgiving was, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Smoke up, Johnny, and all that stuff. And then you look at things like The Jock, which is Emilio Estevez, and he breaks down talking about how he sticky taped a guy's buttocks together, and you're like, surely that's in other films of that nature, to be like Frat House or whatever it is, and it'd be a joke.
Be hilarious, yeah.
But no, with him, he starts crying and
breaking down, yeah, and has so much in common with Bender in that respect. Yeah,
he's trying to deal with his father's expectations,
issues with his dad. Yeah,
and then the nerd tries to kill himself with a flare gun. And here's the thing: in the 80s. This kind of depth wasn't around. It was all about a frat house, or it was all about some kind of scheme or revenge of the nerds kind of crap. So you're like, okay, well, John Hughes is at the height of his powers, but he's dealing with things that haven't been dealt with before in a way that they haven't been dealt before, and he's just putting them all in one location.
And it's been the inspiration for pretty much every teen movie since then. It's been a blueprint for creating teen characters
because we care about them.
Yeah, and they do break the conventions. Like the princess isn't just a princess, and the weird girl isn't just a weird girl.
Yes, even though Ali Sheedy is quite weird, though.
She is, yeah.
It's been used by the action adventure kind of thing. I mean, you look at Colin Farrell stuck in a phone booth. Now,
that should be the most boring film of all time.
Well, unless he's naked.
And doesn't have Keith Sutherland on the other end of the phone.
If you think about it, though, I mean, phone booth is him stuck in a phone booth, and it's interesting. You got Alexander, which is him doing all this stuff with a huge-ass budget, and that sucks. Now,
Yeah, it's not about money.
well, no, it's not about money. It's about
Oh my
Oliver
God.
Stone jerking himself off. So, phone booth. You got him stuck in a phone booth with this crazed guy, basically directing him to do things, or he will kill him and people around him. And it's all about the setup, but it's all about the casting. He's supposed to play this slick guy who is fast-talking and always in control. And then you remove that control, and the person who's the voice on the other end is Kiefer Sutherland. And if you want a menacing voice, you hire him. You hire him or his dad. And then you've got other people like Forrest Whitaker, who goes on to win an Oscar for The Last King of Scotland. But he's the detective who's trying to save his life, who's also piecing together these clues as to this guy who apparently has shot someone. He's not acting the way in which a perpetrator acts. He's acting scared and nervous. And then you got Katie Holmes, who plays the love interest, and you've got the guy's wife, played by Radha Mitchell, Australian, of course. And so there are a lot of different genres that use this one location setup. In saying that, there are ones where it sucks.
Yeah, it can be extremely limiting if you don't have the script or the story to back it up.
And you cannot have the script or the story, and you can have a huge star like Ryan Reynolds, but still, if you make it boring as hell, then people will watch it, but will it be a repeat viewing? No.
No.
And
Talking about Buried,
yes,
which is Ryan Reynolds buried in a coffin alive with nothing but a cell phone that has extremely good range and crystal clear sound, given that he's 6 feet underground, and I think a lighter maybe, and that's it.
Yeah, and the setup is good. It's about a guy who's, I think, in Afghanistan. He's in the Middle East, and he's a contractor. He's not with the army. He's doing it for the money, and the opposite regime basically capture him. They chuck him in a coffin, and they're going to use him for hostage money. Now, the problem with that is it's a nice story. They got a star, and it's an interesting story. But unlike things like Phone Booth and Saw, where you've got multiple angles and it can be visually interesting and you can adapt, when you put someone in a space that's 2 by 6 feet, there's only so much you can do with the camera. And Reynolds does a good job of acting, and it's an extreme situation where he's calling like the embassy and he's like, "Hi, I'm in a coffin and I need to get out." And they're like, "Sorry, you're not part of this embassy anymore because your employer has fired you, so you're no longer covered by the insurance policy, so they're not going to pay off the hostage fees." And he's just like, "You're kidding me. I've just been fired and now I'm going to die." And then he calls his wife in the United States, and you're right, this cell phone has great coverage, and
Really good.
it's like, it's a great, advertisement for, I'm not going to throw out a brand name, but it doesn't work. It's one location and it doesn't work. And the problem is that I feel that some of those films would class as working based on how much they gross. You chuck that at the cinema on a decent weekend, that's going to gross tens of millions of dollars because Ryan Reynolds
Based off
is
his
in
name.
it.
Yeah.
And it'd be like, yep, cool. So you got your box office kind of crap, but did anyone buy it on DVD? No. And did people watch it on TV? As a once
And
and
it's
yes.
not going to stand the test of time the way that Saw or Breakfast Club has and will stand the test of time as good films.
Those that used the limitation of one location to make good films and to make creative choices and to cast well, as opposed to just going, okay, we've got Ryan Reynolds for 10 days between Green Lantern and, Deadpool 50. So, what can we do in 10 days? Well, we could have him on the toilet taking a crap, but now let's put him in a coffin. So I guess that's my take on one location.
Yeah.
If it's done for creative purposes, it usually spawns something that's interesting.
And it's not about the space as well. Like you say, 2 feet by 6 feet. Devil didn't have much more space than that, and they made it work.
That is true. It is true. It's better than Buried, and there is I think about 7 or 8 characters, and then you've got the detectives watching, and it's a bigger space.
And it's not even that it's just one guy, because Phone Booth is just one guy with a phone. Same. It's, yeah.
Yeah, kind
There's-
of, but you
there's
got
other
other
factors.
people. Yeah, I just think that it puts you in a position where you have to be creative and you have to think more about story and character development than you rely on visuals. And it works the vast majority of time. Buried is a clear example of where it didn't work. I would invite other people to discuss on our Facebook page one location films and TV shows where it didn't work. Can you think of any others where you just went, yeah, I wanted to kill myself because it was that boring?
Yeah.
There is another one which I think is called like One Night in the City or that kind of thing. It's a Jim Jarmusch film. It's set in a taxi cab over 3 different taxi drivers. One's Winona Ryder, and it's basically them talking to the people in the back of the taxi cab. And it's not good. It makes you kind of go, huh, couldn't I just sit in the back of a taxi for 90 minutes? I'd probably pay more, but it'd be more interesting. Yeah. So what do you think? Discuss on Facebook. Let us know.
Let us know
Argue
on our
with
Facebook
us.
page.
There is one thing that we can say about us. It's that we're not going to block you if you have a differing opinion. And we welcome discussion. Because
Absolutely.
unlike other
We're up for a
podcasts,
fight.
yeah, I like a good fight. If you can prove me wrong, go for it.
Yeah. So thank you for listening to our show today. We'd like to thank our producer, Dave.
Heads up to Dave, man.
He's
Talk.
done a great job.
We want to hear your voice.
Yo.
Wow.
It's
So-
working.
In the coming weeks, we will be talking about all kinds of different things relating to film and TV, hence the title of our show. It'll be Simon's turn next week. He's going to have a crack at coming up with an awesome theme that
Yeah,
we can
that'll be
hopefully
great.
inspire some zesty discussion on our Facebook page.
Yes, and
If
likewise.
you have any suggestions, give us a shout.
Yes. And I talked over the top of you because I'm a dick.
Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, so people will be monitoring the Facebook page and we will endeavour to basically reply when we can. We do have jobs because we're real people.
Yes, we are humans.
I can say that for certain.
Dave, we're still unsure on.
Yeah. Dave just farted. Maybe we should end on that laughter.
So that should be, yeah, we'll fix that in post. Dun, dun, dun.